Crazy 24 hours, crazy fallout after the Sean Strickland Israel Adesanya press conference. Very interesting but predictable reaction from the media, from the legacy media, from the gatekeepers. We know exactly who these people are. There was one really shocking reaction that I couldn't believe it. Out of all the guys that you see there on the thumbnail, one of these guys surprised me immensely. So it's credit where credit is due. But I'm going to go through a few different bits because my head's all over the place trying to pick a specific video and a specific topic because there's so many little bits and pieces coming in left, right and center. So we're going to talk about the reaction and the fallout after the Israel Adesanya expose and how predictably no one wants to talk about it. We're going to talk a little bit about how I was 100% right when I said 2 weeks ago that Eugene Berryman got it completely wrong and Israel Adesanya got it completely wrong when they said Dricky's had to fight 2 more times and maybe he's not going to get the next title shot. I knew back then, and it's been confirmed just as of yesterday, that it was absolute trash. So I'm going to get into all these. Before I do, if you could hit subscribe, I'd really appreciate that. Really do appreciate the members. That was cool. I'm still trying to figure that out. I will probably do some sort of members only content. I'm trying to figure it out as I go, so just bear with me. Cheers. But yeah, look, we're getting really close to the big fight night and the fallout is there. I think that Israel Adesanya has done a terrible damage control job after the expose online, after this whole dog story. He had a chance to respond to Sean Strickland during the press conference. He decided to wait 3 or 4 hours and do some sort of a video with a cringy one-liner in it. I don't even think it bears talking about. And I actually did think about the fact that he does have a fight coming up. I guess he thinks it's an easy one that he can walk through Strickland, but in the same breath, it is a big fight. You know, there's a weight cut to be done, and then he has all this type of stuff playing on his mind. There's nothing worse than getting caught. There's nothing worse than when you're mitching off school and you think you're away with it and you get home and your parents say, listen, we got a phone call from the principal, you're donezo, and then you get grounded for 3 weeks. And I guess that's the same scenario where Israel Adesanya is for the last couple of days. He's been exposed for really despicable behavior. It's very interesting to see how the mainstream legacy shills, the gatekeepers, as I said, addressed it. Let's have a little look at Michael Bisping, Anthony Smith talking on the Believe You Me podcast. I am really starting to like Anthony Smith over the last few weeks. Obviously, we're talking about personalities and nuanced personalities, so we're never going to agree on everything with every person. But I do like the directions that he leans in a lot of his recent opinions. I think it's very good. As for Michael Bisping, I hate saying it because I am a big fan of his career and I do like his podcast. Dude was on the run here. He didn't want to touch off this story. And there was this weird cut/edit in the middle of Anthony Smith really kind of exposing Israel to Michael Bisping's audience, and it was bizarre and it was clear as day that he just didn't want to talk about it, and there was an edit and boom, we're on to a different subject. So let's have a little look at that.
He went really heavy on the whole touching jerking off dogs on YouTube.
What did he say? Because I haven't seen this, but I've just heard a few people kind of refer to it.
Again, I
don't believe Michael Bisping that he just heard a few people referring to it. I don't believe that the image of Israel Adesanya touching inappropriately his dog is all across the internet right now. I don't think you can jump on Instagram, TikTok or Twitter and Facebook and all these places. I don't think you can jump on there without seeing what he did to the dog. I call bullshit on this one for Michael Bisping. I think that he's trying to play a deflection game, and we can see in a 30 seconds time how far he actually goes to deflect this conversation.
I don't want to piss off Izzy by putting out this weird thing, but he claims, I've never looked for it, but he claims there's a video out there of Adesanya touching a dog's dick. And so he just goes hard on it. He just goes in on him touching dogs' wieners. Rogan did not want to talk about it. He tried to steer away from it, and he couldn't. Sean brought it right back.
Is he used to walk into the octagon and cock his leg and take a little piss? You know what I mean? Rogan didn't want to touch it.
So Michael Bisping is backpedaling here. Sure, Izzy's a dog, right? Remember when he used to walk into the octagon, cock his leg, deflect. Let's not actually talk about how sick and strange this behavior is. Then he starts talking about Joe Rogan not wanting to touch it. Now watch carefully what happens here in this video.
No, well, he tried to steer the conversation away from the dog's penis, and then Sean brought that shit right back.
Oh, rightly so. Why not? When I look at this fight, you know, I think I haven't.
Did everyone see that? Did everyone see that edit? Let me go back and I'll show you one more time.
Away from the dog's penis, and then Sean brought that shit right back.
Oh, rightly so. Why not? When I look at this fight, I think I haven't looked at the reaches, but I think Izzy's like 80, Sean's about 70.
So we jump cut the video. Bisping obviously wasn't happy with the direction that it was going because it was a pejorative towards his boy Izzy. He's a company man, he's a gatekeeper. He doesn't want any negative publicity around Israel. And, it's going to be hard to avoid that in the last couple of days because he's being exposed. But they're doing a decent enough job because, as I said, we're talking about the bigger lads here in terms of Michael Bisping, world champion, huge podcast, 600,000 people watching him on that podcast, and he's a commentator working for the UFC, so he's not going to go deep in on this. We could see that he was uncomfortable when Anthony Smith was talking about it, and then we have a weird jump cut, and all of a sudden we're talking about reach advantages and height advantages and grappling styles. It was just like, okay, so we were almost there, we were almost talking about it, and then we didn't. Okay, we know exactly what's going on here. So I wanted to talk about this because I've been watching the reaction over the last 24 hours, especially after the expose and after the press conference. And my good friend Chael talks about it, but doesn't actually talk about it. Michael Bisping talks about it and deflects it and does a weird jump cut. It's a lot of deflection going on. A lot of these people have premeditated reasons why they don't want to touch it. And we all know that like Izzy's the golden boy, apparently. So I think it's interesting to talk about it and just expose even the reaction to what is happening. Let's have a little look and we'll see what Chael made of the press conference. What did he think about the dog scenario? Did he find it disgusting? Did he find Israel like a really weird dude, and why would he do that to a dog? And then all the expose stuff that came out after it. What about the China stuff? What does he think about that? What does he think about the race baiting? Because all these were put to Israel Adesanya by Sean Strickland and Israel didn't respond. But he did do a cool, cringy little video 4 hours later, and it was like, don't reply, respond, or some trash like that. And I was like, okay, dude, whatever. So with Sean Strickland putting everything out in the open in terms of what Israel Adesanya is, what was Chael's takeaway from that press conference?
Izzy was getting irritated and Izzy was getting things under his skin, but the greatest line of the entire press conference belongs to Izzy and the crowd didn't pop.
The greatest line of the press conference belongs to Izzy and the crowd didn't pop. I heard him say it and I didn't believe it was real, and then he said it again.
The greatest line of the press conference is when Sean comes at Izzy for being the Chinese champion. And Izzy responds, I am the Chinese champion, and I am the Brazilian champion, and I am the Australian champion, and I am the American champion. I am the world champion. It was great. It was poetry, and it was pocketed. He knew it was coming. He knew the Chinese stuff was coming. He was ready for it. He had an answer. I love that kind of stuff. I'm just sharing for you the greatest line of the press conference. Didn't get much of a pop at all.
The greatest line of the press conference didn't even get a pop. This beautifully poetic verbalization of diarrhea or whatever, this cringe fest, didn't get a pop because it was cringe, bro. That was it. I mean, look, it was terrible. It was absolutely garbage. That's why it didn't get a pop. That was Chael's take on Israel Adesanya. He believes that he won the press conference, I guess, with that line. Okay, Bisping didn't want to touch it, did a little jump cut. So who's the mystery guest? Who's the guy that went in hardest on Israel Adesanya yesterday in the aftermath of the disastrous press conference? Well, it's my good friend Luke Thomas. Who would believe it? Luke Thomas went in hard on Izzy. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not mounting a massive amount of praise on Luke Thomas for what he said here, but he was the best guy who covered this story yesterday. 100%. Let's have a little listen.
It's fucking weird. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, the whole thing is bizarre, candidly. And then he was leaning into it today. Did you guys see the tweets? At first, I didn't even know what the fuck people were talking about, and then I caught up on the story. And then he was tweeting through it like, here's this dog doing this thing around me. Here's this dog doing that. And then he turned it into like a John Wick thing. Like
In fairness, credit where it's due. Luke Thomas did the best job going after him yesterday. He calls it out. He even brought up tweets that were in the aftermath of the press conference that most people aren't talking about, but they all know it and they all see it 100%. From the last video, I was kind of happy in terms of, listen, we can all see it now. You've been exposed. I'm really happy with the place where we're headed in terms of, okay, you're not going to pull the wool over our eyes anymore. And even Luke Thomas's response here exemplifies that even more, because Bisping, Chael, not only did they not want to touch the dog story, but they didn't even go down the rabbit hole of the disgusting tweets that this guy is putting out, leaning into it. Absolutely not. I think that Luke does like a 15-minute section here talking about how disgusting and weird it is. And he doesn't pull any punches. He goes for it. Fair play.
Don't get me wrong. Like, you can't defend it. It's fucking gross and weird. But it's like, so it just I don't know how as an MMA fan you can't be embarrassed that this is the fucking discourse on Fight Week. right? Like, this is embarrassing for the sport that this is a thing that is coming up in press conferences. I sort of understand it, but like the whole thing is just, it's a weird look for him. It's a bad look in many ways. It's a bad look for the sport. It's a weird look for the sport. It's gross. Why are we talking about this any more than we have to?
He does try to deflect it here and there in a couple of places, but you know what? I'll give him a little bit of leeway because he went in decently hard and actually called it out for being weird, disgusting. You know, he tries to say that it's not a crime. It would never be a crime. He tries to say that the sport is filled with weirdos, and he tries to say this is a bad look for the sport, you know? Luke Thomas has been kind of directing his content away from MMA towards the boxing, and look, fair play to him, leave him do whatever he needs to do. But to hammer the point home, it's like, let's not talk about what other people do. Let's not talk about the sport in these strange generalizations. Let's talk about the person. The person who is your favorite fighter and is the UFC's golden boy. Let's talk about him specifically. You did it to the extent where I thought you had the best response. This story is way deeper and way bigger than just like weirdos in the sport or weirdos that are interested in MMA. This is about personalities, and Israel Adesanya has a really strange one and a really weird one, and it actually needs to be called out for no other reason. There's no hate involved in it, for the reason being that how can we be told that this guy is perfect in every way, shape and form, and we can see the opposite with our own eyes? That's why it needs to be called out. If it was any other fighter, it needs to be done the same. Love Conor McGregor. He has to be called out for the bullshit that he does. You can't be punching people. You can't be walking around with these yokes at 3 o'clock in the morning coming in and out of your hotel room. You can't be doing that when you're married with kids or when you're in a relationship with kids. So that has to be called out. You can't be going around like chazzed out of it all the time. Does that mean that I hate Conor McGregor? Absolutely not. I love Conor McGregor. And if Conor McGregor has a fight next weekend, I'm cheering for Conor McGregor, no matter who it's against. I've seen Israel Adesanya do some good things in the past. You know, he backed up his boy Joe Rogan before. He called out the flight logs, and then he went off and hung out with some of the people that were on it. So it was a little bit hypocritical there. Last week he spoke about homeschooling. He spoke about the public school system not being the place for individuals to thrive, and I'm 100% on board with that. Homeschooling is what he mentioned. Luke Thomas went after him for the homeschooling thing, and he was adamant about it. He was like, no, that's a terrible idea. How could you even espouse an idea like this? As a parent who homeschools, I can't understand how these people actually believe that sending your kid to some public school where their lives are at risk on a given day, not only by fellow pupils, but even by the rhetoric being taught from the teachers. You know, we spoke about it a million times before. Oppressor, oppressed. If you've got white skin, then you're an oppressor. And that is being taught in public school systems across the board, whether it's America, Britain, or Ireland. And you got to get your kids away from that. You cannot have your kids going to school and coming home filled with anxiety because of the color of their skin. And not to mention the fact that these teachers are not teachers, they're activists. And the majority of these people, their sole purpose is to include your kid into a far left-leaning, progressive, utopian ideology, which means they've got to bend the knee to Black Lives Matter, or they got to chop off some body parts, or they have to bow the knee to someone who is chopping off a body part as if it's normal. Or any sense of morality or spirituality has to be eradicated. That has to be stamped out. So we're just producing these factory farmed children that are all ready to go straight into the workforce. Let's get you into a system where you can sit and be quiet for 8 hours a day, not ask questions, hold up your hand if you want to go to the bathroom, and then you're ready to go straight into the workforce. Eradicating any sense of creativity, any sense of entrepreneurship. That's all done. There's no such thing as that coming out of a public school. I'm going to jump over here. Submission Radio did an interview with Eugene Berryman yesterday, and they spoke about who Israel's going to fight next, and he definitively gave the answer, which is
the next fight is definitely Dricus.
It is Dricus. Okay.
It has to be. It has to be. No other fight makes sense. It has to be Dricus.
First of all, he can't say Dricus. He's saying Driscus or something. That's fine. That's fair enough. Everyone has their own nuances to the way they say a name. But secondly, 2 weeks ago, Dricus was a coward who faked injury and couldn't make the fight and should have been at the fight, and now you're not getting a chance. That's what the narrative was, right? It was blasted all across MMA media. Everyone picked up on it. I called it out. I said it was bullshit. The same way I said the whole Leon Edwards thinking that he holds some sort of power was bullshit. Colby was getting the fight no matter what because Dana knew that that was the fight to make, and he had already promised Colby, and Colby's the guy. It's as simple as that. And you had big content creators that pushed back on me last week saying, absolutely not, Dricus is not getting the next fight. He's going to fight 2 other people. You missed your chance. When your dream is there, you don't fake an injury, punk. That's what people were saying. And I was saying, yeah, that smells like bullshit to me. I feel like Dricus is the guy to come in here. This is the fight to make. This is the fight that's going to happen. I don't believe for 1 second it's Israel Adesanya's choice. I believe he's been told by the UFC that Dricus du Plessis is getting the next title shot. But you know what? I was right. Simple as that. I said there was no way that there's 2 or 3 fights before Dricus gets back to the top. He's the number 1 guy. Regardless of whether you like him or not, he's the guy that's fighting next for the title, whether it's Israel Adesanya or Sean Strickland. We'll see come Sunday evening. But so that's it. I think I covered all the little bits and pieces that were flying around in my head, and I'll try to package them all together and make one decent video. And as I said, if you could subscribe, share, like the video, and just get the word out there, I really appreciate you. Cheers.